Hi everybody, and welcome to this video on the sleep stages as part of the psychological health and well-being topic for stage 2 psychology. Let's get started. So sleep is made up of 5 stages, each with different characteristics. It's often a misconception in psychology and sleep research that you're awake and then you're asleep and then you're awake again. Sleep is actually a very complex process, and there are 5 stages, each with its own unique characteristics in the brain and the body. So the first 4 stages are generalized as what's called non-REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement sleep. So in other words, the first 4 stages, there's no rapid eye movement. And then the 5th stage is REM sleep, so characterized by rapid eye movement. So humans have around 4 to 6 sleep cycles each night, and each cycle lasts around 90 to 110 minutes on average. So depending on how much sleep you need or how much sleep you get, depends on how many cycles you will obviously end up getting. So in our first sleep cycle, humans only get about 10 minutes of REM sleep. So we get most of our deep restorative sleep in the first sleep cycle, which makes sense because that's when our level of awareness tends to be at its lowest in the wee hours of the morning of 2 and 4 a.m. Whereas this then increases to 30 to 60 minutes by the last sleep cycle. So our body prepares us to wake up by putting us in the lighter stage of sleep, which is REM. So I'll talk more about this as we go through this video, but there's some basics just to get us started. All right, so 5 stages of sleep. First 4 are non-REM, 5th is REM. 4 to 6 are sleep cycles each night, lasting about 90 to 110 minutes. We get most of our restorative sleep in the first sleep cycle and most of our dreaming sleep in the last sleep cycle. So let's go into a bit more detail. So sleep is objectively measured using various methods. So this is going back slightly to science inquiry skills and research methods. So all of these are objective quantitative ways in which we can measure sleep. So there's the electroencephalograph, or EEG, which measures brainwave patterns during sleep. So we can look at someone's EEG and know what stage of sleep that they're in and how much they are getting. We have an electrooculogram, or EOG, which measures eye movement during sleep, and obviously if someone is in non-REM or REM sleep. And we've got an electromyogram, or EMG, which measures the activity of muscles during sleep. So we know that different stages, people tend to twitch more or be more active in their muscles, whereas other stages of sleep, they are essentially paralyzed, except for obviously breathing and their eyes moving. So an electroencephalograph, as I've said, measures brainwave patterns during sleep. So we can tell, again, what stage of sleep is in, how much they're getting, and so on. I go into this in a little bit more detail later on in this video, but you can see here that our brainwave activity changes significantly depending on what stage that we are in. Similar with the EOG, all right, so measures eye movement during sleep. So we can tell, obviously, if someone is in non-REM or REM by their eye movements. So when we're awake, we have rolling eye movements, and then, stage 2, no eye movement, slow wave, no eye movement, and then rapid eye movement. Obviously, our eyes are darting around in all sorts of different directions at a very rapid rate. And an electromyogram, which measures the activity of muscles during sleep. So again, we can tell what stage of sleep a person is in by measuring their muscle movement, counting their muscle movements. So all 3 of these measures are objective quantitative because they're all able to be verified, and obviously they're measured in number form. So let's have a look at this summary of the 5 stages of sleep. So starting with stage 1, which is when we are still technically awake. So this is described as relaxed wakefulness. So this is when we're in bed trying to get to sleep, but we are profoundly relaxed. We're not asleep yet, but we're not far off. So this is characterized by alpha and theta brainwaves present on an EEG. The way I like to remember it is alpha, A for awake. We have reduced brain activity because our brainwave activity is obviously slowing down to prepare us to go into the first few stages of sleep. We can still roll our eyes, so we have rolling eye movements because, again, we are technically awake. Our breathing and our heart rate slows down. We do have reduced muscle activity, but sometimes we can have what's called hypnic jerks, which is that violent sort of big twitch that often happens, often accompanied by a falling sensation. This is completely normal, nothing to worry about. So it's thought that the reason this happens is to discharge that last bit of tension from within the body, because typically soon after we have these jerks, we fall asleep pretty quickly. So it's often, characterized as getting the last little bit of energy or tension out of our bodies, and also just a crosswire between stage 1 and transitioning into stage 2, but it's very normal. It's nothing to worry about. So stage 1 typically lasts around 10 minutes. It shouldn't be any longer than this. If it's longer than this, then you're not sleep deprived enough. So you're too awake, in other words. If it's taking you less than 10 minutes to fall asleep, you're sleep deprived and you need to get more sleep on a consistent basis. There are exceptions, of course, but that's typical. Then we move on to stage 2 sleep, which is characterized as light sleep. So we are asleep in stage 2. We've fallen asleep now, but we are easily woken up still. So stage 2 sleep is the majority of sleep that we get each night, and it is characterized by sleep spindles and K complexes on an EEG. What this means is just bursts of slower brainwave activity to then allow us to transition into slow wave sleep, as you can see here. I'll talk a little bit more about that later though. So when we're in stage 2 sleep, we have medium amplitude in muscle movement on an EMG, so we are still quite twitchy, in other words, and we are still moving around a little bit, particularly our hands and feet. We have no eye movement in stage 2, so our eyes will remain facing forward, or they may roll to the back of our heads and stay there. Our temperature, heart rate, breathing rate, and blood pressure continue to drop, so our physiological responses continue to drop. And stage 2 lasts about 20 minutes in our first sleep cycle. So what I'm talking about here is a typical sleep cycle that happens at first, but obviously the stages will change as the night goes on, as I'll talk about and as I have talked about already. All right, so from stage 2, we then move into stage 3, which is slow wave sleep, or SWS. So at stage 3, slow waves start to appear on an EEG called delta waves. So we name the waves, or we name the different waves depending on what stage someone is in, so we can obviously easily identify them on an EEG. So in stage 3, delta waves make up 20 to 50% of someone's brainwave activity. There's medium to low amplitude and muscle tension, so there's really not much movement going on at all in terms of the hands and feet and the arms and legs. There's still no eye movement in stage 3, and heart rate, breathing, blood pressure, and temperature continue to drop. So stage 3 lasts around 15 minutes in the first sleep cycle. Obviously, that then transitions into stage 4. So stage 4 is the deepest stage of sleep that somebody can be in. Delta waves account for more than 50% of brainwave activity, and delta again are very, very slow waves, hence slow wave sleep. This is the restorative sleep that we want each night. So the slow wave sleep of stage 3 and 4, the more of this we get, the more restored we feel the next day. So often when we wake up and we think, wow, I have had the best night's sleep ever, that's because we have gotten enough or adequate stage 3 and 4 sleep, so slow wave sleep. There are certain instances where we will, sleep 8 or 9 hours and we feel like we haven't slept at all. That might be because, again, we didn't get enough slow wave sleep, and there's different things that can interrupt that process and stop us getting slow wave sleep, which I will talk about in a future video. So back to stage 4, again, the deepest stage of sleep. More than 50% of our brainwave activity is accounted for by delta waves. There is little to no muscle movement at all, so we're really not moving at all except obviously breathing. There is no eye movement still, and breathing is at its slowest and deepest. So sometimes it's easy to tell what stage a person is in if they're in stage 4 just by listening to their breathing. So very, very deep and very, very slow. So often it's characterized by a 6 to 8 second breath in, and then the same amount of time out for one breath, which is obviously quite slow and quite deep. So it's hard to wake someone from this stage. If someone is awoken from stage 4, they are very, very confused and disorientated, which makes sense because their brainwave activity is dramatically slower than what it would be if they were awake. And because of that, if someone is awoken in stage 4, they're very, very confused and disorientated, often don't know what's going on or where they are, and it takes them several minutes while their brainwave activity speeds up again to understand or comprehend what's going on. So that's often why as well people will say, you know, the next day after a bad storm during the night, oh, did you hear the thunderstorm last night? And people will say, yes, it woke me up, or no, I slept right through it. Often the people that sleep right through it were in stage 4 sleep. So it is actually very hard to wake somebody up. And that's often why as well, there can be a lot of noise going on in the home or a lot of noise going on around the place, yet people will sleep straight through it because they're in stage 4. So again, the amount of slow wave sleep we get depends and then correlates with how restored we feel the next day. So if we get enough of this, we feel amazing the next day. If we don't get enough of this, we feel sluggish and tired still. So stage 3 and 4 combined lasts about half an hour in the first sleep cycle. In some sources or some readings that you may come across, a lot of sources will combine stage 3 and 4 together. So it'll just be collectively known as slow wave sleep, which is also correct because as we can see, they're very, very similar. Now, stage 5 doesn't come after stage 4. So a lot of people think it's sequential. So to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's actually not the case. What actually happens is sleep lightens and moves back through the stages. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, but then it needs to go back through the stages for a sleep cycle. So from 4 to 3 to 2, and then to REM. So one sleep cycle is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, REM, 1. And that's one sleep cycle, and that happens 4 to 6 times a night. So when we reach REM, which is obviously rapid eye movements, this is the period or the stage of sleep where we report dreaming. So when we have those very vivid dreams or those vivid nightmares, we are in REM sleep, which is stage 5. And it's characterized by our eyes darting around in all sorts of different directions. So the EEG in REM is basically identical to that of an awake person, which is why lucid dreaming is so common. So even though we may be dreaming, we may be aware that we're dreaming and we can control the plot line of the dream that we're having, or if there is an external source in the room or external stimuli, like someone talking to us while we're asleep, that may integrate itself into the plot line or what's going on in our dream. So yes, we're asleep, but there is an awareness of what's going on. So it's that sort of gray area between sleep and wake, and that's very, very typical of stage 5 sleep. So on an EEG, there's beta and some alpha waves present, and our physiological responses actually go up. So our pulse, breathing, blood pressure will all start to rise. And again, like I said, our eyes move around very, very quickly. So as I said before, we get most of our REM sleep in our last sleep cycle, and this makes sense because then it's our body's way of transitioning from being in a very deep sleep to being in the lighter sleep where we're easily awoken from a dream. So if you recall your alarm going off in the mornings and you recall dreaming immediately before, that's a good thing because it means that your circadian rhythm is synced to come out of the lighter stage of sleep rather than a deeper stage of sleep. Okay, so just to recap, the stages obviously go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2 REM, and then back to 1. That is one sleep cycle, and we do this 4 to 6 times a night if we get the correct amount of hours for our age. So that's also why people will wake up periodically throughout the night and then fall asleep very quickly soon after, because they're coming out of a sleep cycle and then they will start the process all over again. So again, we get most of our restorative slow wave sleep in our first sleep cycle and most of our dreaming sleep in the last sleep cycle as REM increases. So it's thought that we get most of our restorative sleep again because that's typically the lowest level of awareness hours of 2 to 4 a.m. And it's also our body's way of making sure that we get some restorative sleep first and then our dreaming sleep last. As we can see here, this is an EEG reading, so we can see these are our alpha waves here for awake. This is when we're very calm. We're still awake, but we're calm, so typical of meditation or being very relaxed. This is when we're in bed, so alpha and theta waves. You can see here it's starting to slow down with bursts of slower brainwave activity. Stage 2, light sleep. All right, easily awoken, but we are technically asleep. Characterized by, again, sleep spindle here and a K complex here, which are just bursts of slower brainwave activity to allow us to transition to stage 3 and 4. This is our slow wave restorative sleep, and you can see a very big difference, all right, in the speed and amplitude of our brain waves when we are in stage 3 and 4. If we look at REM, however, it's basically identical to that of being awake, which is why it's so easy to wake up from a dream or a nightmare. So those are the 5 stages of sleep. and how they affect us. And I hope you found this video useful. You know, I find this fascinating. I love talking about this. But if you do have any other questions, you know what to do. Let me know.